Well, hello there. My name is Marley Bird, and in this video, I will teach you how to make the textured knit dishcloth. I've had a lot of requests lately for some simple dishcloth patterns, and I know this one is a step up from garter stitch, but if you can knit and purl, you can complete this pattern in no time. I am following along with the pattern from yarnspirations.com for the textured knit dishcloth. In the pattern, you will find a full list of the materials and all of the instructions. To make this beautiful pattern, you need a few simple items. First, you need a ball of Lily sugar and cream yarn, a pair of size 7 knitting needles, a good pair of scissors, a tape measure, and a tapestry needle so you can weave in those ends. The only thing left to do is download that free pattern and gather your materials. Once you have all that, join me back here and I'll get you started on this really great dishcloth project. This dishcloth is a nice large size dishcloth that measures about 9 inches by 9 inches. Mine's a little bit bigger than that. To begin this pattern, you cast on 42 stitches. The stitch multiple for this dishcloth is 6 plus 12. The 12 stitches are what you need to have the 5 stitches of garter stitch on the outside of the stitch pattern, and then the 2 extra stitches make it so that your stitch pattern is symmetrical on the actual fabric. For this video, I will be using a smaller number of stitches so that we can get through the stitch pattern quickly, but for you, be sure to cast on 42 stitches. I chose to use the long tail cast on, but if you have a different cast on you prefer, go ahead and use that. Once all of your stitches are cast on, you will turn your work and then knit 9 rows of garter stitch. In the pattern, it says that this first row is the wrong side. So as I turn my work, this now will be the right side. So I'm going to knit back. And again, you're supposed to do 9 rows of garter stitch of just knitting, which will give you a total of 5 garter stitch rows at the bottom of your dishcloth. Once all 9 rows are completed, your work will look a little something just like this. And it's at this point we will jump in to the actual pattern for the body of the dishcloth. And conveniently, it starts off with a row of just knits. So very easy to do. And you will do a row of just knits every time you're on this side of the fabric. So if you wanted to, you could take a stitch marker and add it to the side of the fabric. So that way you are aware, okay, every time I see that stitch marker, I know I'm just on a knit side. For row 2, I am going to make a suggestion to make it easy for you to recognize the garter stitch on the outside of the body. So you'll notice on row 2, the instructions tell you to knit 5. So you will knit 5. And then it says purl to the last 5 stitches. I want you to take a stitch marker and place it on your needle after that first knit 5. Those 5 stitches will always be knit throughout the entire construction of this dishcloth. The same goes for the last knit 5. So we'll place a marker down there as well. Once you place your marker, go ahead and purl to the last 5 stitches. And then I will grab another marker and place it directly onto my needle. And then I finish up with knit 5. Those markers are purely there for me to remember, hey, make sure you start off with those 5 knits and end with those 5 knits. Now as I turn my work and I begin my 3rd row, remember this row is just knitting. And I remember that because I'm looking at this stitch marker down here. So for this entire row, I will just knit. I like to think of the wrong side rows. Those are my real action rows because those are the rows that I am doing something more than just knitting across the stitches. Notice I'm just slipping the marker to the other needle. Doesn't do anything for me really on this side. It's really on the other side that I like to use those markers, okay? So as I turn my work and I begin row 4, you'll notice it starts off with a knit 5. I will slip my marker, just always, whenever I come to that marker, I'm just gonna slip it. And now I have purl 2, and the next part of the instructions are my repeat. So this is what I will repeat all the way down to my last 5 stitches. So I will knit 4, so I make sure I bring my yarn between my needles, back to the back, and I knit 4. Bring my yarn between my needles to the front, and I will purl 2. All right, so that's my repeat. I'll do that again. Yarn between my needles to the back, knit 4, yarn between my needles to the front, and purl 2. You would repeat this all the way down to the last 5 stitches. Remember, I'm doing a smaller swatch. That brings me to my marker, and I finish up with a knit 5. Okay? It doesn't look like much when you're looking at it from the wrong side, but as we turn our work and take a look at the right side, we can begin to see that we're getting some texture happening up here where we did the knits on the wrong side. Can you see that? Okay. It's at this point where a lot of people will start to get confused as to what row they're on. So here is a tip for you. I like to use Post-it notes, and every time I finish a row, I make a little tick mark. And I know that to complete an entire pattern of this repeat, it takes me until I get 12 tick marks. So I always write the number 12 out there. Then as I'm making my tick marks and I get 12 of them, I know I've completed a full repeat and it's time to start back with row 1 again. I use Post-it notes all the time to keep track of rows. I find it very helpful as I am working across several rows of a project. Now remember, on this row, we are just knitting because it is a right side row. And once I complete this row, I will put a tick mark. So I always complete the row first before I add the tick mark. That way, if I should get up and walk away for some reason and I come back, I won't look at my Post-it note and wonder, okay, did I just complete that last row or am I on that last row? If I keep it consistent, I know that my tick marks represent rows that are 100% complete, and I recommend you do the same. Okay, as we come down here to the end of row 5, we will turn our work. I will add my tick mark, and then I will begin row 6, which is just like row 4. So we know how to do this without any issues. We will knit the first 5. I will scooch my stitch marker over, and then I jump to a purl 2. So I bring my yarn forward between my needles, always between your needles, purl 2 stitches, my yarn back between my needles, and I knit 4. Bring my yarn between my needles to the front, I purl 2, yarn between my needles to the back, and I knit 4. Bring my yarn between my needles to the front, I purl 2. I think I split my yarn on that last one. Let's do that again. Purl 2, there we go. And then I can slip my marker. Remember, you're repeating that all the way down to the last 5 stitches. And then you end with the knit 5. Pretty easy stuff. That is the end of row 6. So I will do my tick mark, turn my work. As I turn my work and look at row 7, I will be knitting the entire row. So without any hoopla or anything else, I simply will knit down this row, just like every single right side row. At the end of row 7, you can really begin to see how those textured stitches are really showing up on the right side of the fabric. And when you turn your work and begin row 8, first, let me make my tick mark so I don't forget. Row 8, we are going back to the stockinette portion. And what this will do is it's going to separate this textured portion right here. And when we do the texture again, it'll be between these two texture sections. So on row 8, we are repeating row 2. And we know how to do that. We are going to knit our 5, slip our marker, and then purl to the last 5 stitches. And for us, we have a marker down there because we need that marker to remind us that those last 5 stitches are always knit. I know that for myself, if I don't have a marker there, I tend to purl those stitches and then I have to frog back and it's just not pretty. So I will always use a marker to help me identify stitches that need to be a little bit different than the rest of the pattern. And that's why I use them. All right, so I will knit the last 5. And then row 9, once again, is just a row of knitting. So let me go ahead and finish my row 9. I'll turn my work, make my little tick mark, and do row 9. At the end of row 9, take a look at your fabric once again. See how now we have some stockinette separating this texture portion from the garter, okay? So we have this stockinette. Now that we have finished row 9, we can turn our work and begin row 10. And on row 10, the position of our texture stitches do change. So when looking at the instructions, you'll notice that it says to knit 8. So the first thing I want you to do is knit those first 5 just like normal, and then slip your marker and continue on. So this would be 6, 7, and 8. All right, so we're going to keep our marker there because that still keeps our first 5 in garter stitch. Now this is our pattern repeat. We will purl 2 and then knit 4. That's it. Purl 2, knit 4, and you do that down to the last 4 stitches. So I will purl 2 and then knit 4. And you might be like, wait a minute, Marley, you only have 3 stitches there before your marker. You're absolutely correct. I will knit those 3, slip my marker, and that will be my 4th. And then I knit the last 4 stitches. That still keeps my first 5 stitches and my last 5 stitches in the knit garter stitch that I want. It's just the way the pattern is written. It makes it so that those stitch markers look like they're out of place, but they really are still in place. Just follow the instructions and slip your marker when you come to them. It's really that easy. Turn your work. Don't forget to do your tick mark because that is row 10. And for row 11, we simply knit across. At the end of row 11, go ahead and take a look at your work and you will notice, just like I said, those texture stitches are now in between the texture stitches from the row before. And that's what's going to give us sort of that block look. When you turn your work and you begin row 12, remember this is the last row of the row repeat. You are just repeating row 10. So we will do that knit 8. So knit 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, slip our marker, 6, 7, 8. And then we work our repeat to the last 4 stitches, which is purl 2, knit 4. Purl 2, knit 4. Remember on your last repeat, if you're using those markers, that will be a slip marker and get that 4th one on the other side of the marker. And then you knit to the end of the row. Okay. gonna set this down and we're gonna take a look at it. So again, on the wrong side, it doesn't look like much. All of the texture stitches will show up on the right side. And you can see here, we have beautiful texture here, and texture started right here, here in the center, and right here, okay? To continue on with the dishcloth, you repeat these last 12 rows until your dishcloth measures about 8 inches. You want to end after a row 6 or a row 12. Then you will work in garter stitch, just knitting every single row for 8 rows, and then you will bind off. Pretty simple stuff. Because I know some people aren't sure how to bind off, let me show you how to bind off on the little swatch that we're using. Obviously, you will have some garter stitch before you bind off, but binding off is really this simple. You will knit 2 stitches, and then you will have the back stitch jump up and over that front stitch. Then you will knit 1 stitch, have that back stitch jump up and over that front stitch. You will do this all the way down the row, and at the end of the row, you will cut your yarn and pull the string through the stitches. At the end of your project, you will have 2 ends to weave in, one at the very end and one at the beginning. Because we are using a really strong cotton yarn, what you can do is thread your yarn onto a tapestry needle, and on the wrong side of the fabric, I like to take my yarn and I am weaving it through the stitches, simulating the actual knit stitch, but I'm only doing it over a couple of them. And when I come back up here, I am actually going to just do a solid knot in my dishcloth. And I rarely ever put knots in my knitting, but I feel like when you're using a cotton dishcloth like this, a knot just works really well because this cotton is incredibly strong, okay? So I put a knot in it. Once I put a knot in it, I do weave in a little bit more of the tail just to try and secure it a little bit. Once you've done that, you can go ahead and snip your tail off and your piece is nice and finished. What do you say we take a look at the finished dishcloth? So this is my finished dishcloth, and you can see the beautiful texture stitches all along here with the garter at the bottom and the sides and the top. Mine is a little bit shorter than 8 inches, but I liked where I finished in my project. I finished after a row 6, and then I went into my garter stitch. When you finish your dishcloth, if you're using a darker color of Lily Sugar and Cream, I highly recommend washing your dishcloth before you use it. The dark colors tend to bleed just a little bit, and you want to make sure that you are not getting that color on anything that you don't want it to be on. But once it's washed and dried, you're good to use it whenever you want. I hope you enjoy making this really fun dishcloth. I love how big it is, and these are so useful. I know you will find a good home for yours as well. I'm Marley Bird, and I'll talk to you again soon. Bye. Thanks so much for joining me on the Marley Bird YouTube channel. If you liked what you saw, don't forget to hit subscribe. I've put a link right over there, or you can watch a couple of the videos I've already selected for you right down there. If you want to follow me on social media, I've put my links right over there. You could have all Marley all the time. Bye guys.